June is National PTSD Awareness Month. My name is Jeff Arnold. I've got some business to take care of. We want to thank our OCC sponsors, the Office of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Justice, along with our Student Veterans of America. I want to let our audience know that this event is being recorded for future use. And I'd like to explain our format today. It's a very simple format. We have an outstanding panelist of 5 individuals, and I will be asking each one of them a question, and then they will take 5 to 7 minutes to give us their response to that. We want to encourage you to, if you have questions, to please put them in the question and answering box. And then at the end, after all our panelists have spoken, we will be fielding the questions, and our panelists will be back to take those questions from you. There's 2 things I want you to get out of today. I want you to have a clearer understanding of PTSD, and I want you to know that there's treatment and help out there and available. At this time, I'd like to introduce our panelist. Our first panelist is Dr. Andrea Calabrese. She is the Chief Operations Officer for Child and Family Charities. They are located in Lansing, Michigan. Our second panelist is Shannon Perry. She is the PTSD Program Coordinator for the John Dingell VA Medical Center. Our third panelist is from Oakland Community College, one of our psychology instructors, Cheryl Decker. And Melvin Chapman is also a psychology instructor here at OCC. And our final panelist is Christine Evans, who is one of our counselors here at OCC. So I'd like to bring on our first panelist, Dr. Calabrese. There she is. Doctor, welcome to Oakland Community College.
Thank you, Jeff.
Well, we're so happy to have you here. And I thought we'd get today's event started with, let's get right to the source. And my question for you is, what is PTSD and what is C-PTSD?
Okay. So starting with PTSD. So PTSD is post-traumatic stress disorder, which is listed in the DSM. So the DSM-5 is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual that we use to diagnose individuals with mental health disorders. PTSD is under trauma and stress-related disorders in the DSM. And it has gone through many iterations, many changes. The DSM is reviewed anywhere from 7 to 10 years. We get a new version of the DSM. So the most current version that we're using is the DSM-5 TR. So in the DSM, this particular disorder, when I say it's gone through many changes, it was not listed in the DSM until, believe it or not, 1980. So we did not have a diagnostic code or diagnosis for PTSD until 1980. So if you can imagine what has occurred in our world from the beginning of time, because trauma is something that just didn't happen. We've always had traumatic experiences, but this was a way to categorize it for individuals. So if you think across what has happened in our world and how the PTSD diagnosis came about and what it was particularly linked to when it began, when we first started using it as a diagnosis. So one of the most prominent events that have happened in our world right before we had the diagnosis was Vietnam. So our veterans, many of our veterans who experienced that, my father is one of them, he's a Vietnam veteran, there was no diagnosis for the trauma that had occurred to the veterans, especially on the front lines. So we didn't have any diagnosis or treatment for individuals who were presenting with these symptoms. So many of the symptoms of post-traumatic stress are emotional constriction or hyperarousal. This is where we see nightmares or flashbacks, and depersonalization or derealization, where an individual feels like they're not part of the world, or the world seems strange to them because the trauma has disrupted our worldview. What we knew of the world and how we were safe in the world has changed. So these are some of the particular symptoms of PTSD. Now, when I like to talk about PTSD, I look at it as on a timeline, or if you look at one end, we say acute, there's acute stress or acute trauma, and all the way on the other end tends to be chronic or complex trauma. So all of us probably have experienced some type of trauma in our lives, and based on who we are and the resilience that we may have, that's what helps us understand the trauma, heal from the trauma, and recover and move forward. So this is different for different individuals, depending on the environment that a person grew up in, the support that they could have. So ACEs, adverse child experiences, play a role in resiliency. And we look at that when we think about trauma as well. Now, I'm probably going too far off the question, but all of it is interrelated. So looking at this trauma timeline, if you're on the end of the acute, so these symptoms can resolve themselves in anywhere from 4 weeks to 3 months. It really depends on what it was. Most likely, it was probably a single event trauma. Whereas if you look at the end of the trauma timeline, where you have more chronic or complex trauma, you're talking about a series of traumatic events that are on top of each other, almost like an onion, like the layers. So what happens there, what makes it more complex, is that there is little recovery time between these events that are happening, and it's more pervasive for the person. So when we're on the complex end of PTSD, the events that occur could be childhood trauma involving sexual abuse or physical abuse or emotional abuse or neglect. It could be domestic violence or intimate partner violence that is happening, that is causing this more complex, compounded end of PTSD, which then the healing is very different for an individual who has more CPTSD, is what we call complex PTSD. So when we talked about the symptoms, so intrusion and emotional numbing and hypervigilance are all parts of the symptoms of PTSD. But what are the events that can cause PTSD? Because when we go back to the beginning of this diagnosis, which it was first listed in the DSM-3, which was published in 1980, it had stated that you would have to witness or experience a life-threatening event.
Mm.
So that has changed. That diagnosis has changed over the years. People have experienced trauma, and it may not have been a life-threatening event. People can be traumatized by many different events, both man-made and we say God-made. So man-made event could be a war. A God-made event could be a hurricane. So that's the difference between the two. But also other things can be very traumatic for individuals, such as going through a divorce can be very traumatic. Being separated from family can be very traumatic. Losing a job, losing a home, those are very traumatic events for an individual, where they may not have experienced a life-threatening event, but still nonetheless are showing the symptoms of PTSD. So that is the answer to the first question.
Doctor, thank you so much for that input. And I want to encourage our viewing audience that if you have any further questions for Dr. Calabrese, please put them in the Q&A and we will certainly get back to those. Our next panelist is Shannon Perry. She is the PTSD program coordinator for the John Dingell VA Medical Center. And ask her to please come on at this time. There. Hi, Shannon. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Very good. Thank you. Very good. Well, basically, I'd like to kind of follow up with our initial first question and ask you this. What type of treatment/therapy is available for treating someone with PTSD?
Thank you for asking. There are two methods for treating someone diagnosed with PTSD. There's medication, which some of you may be familiar with, like Zoloft or Paxil or Prozac. And then there's also psychotherapy. Psychotherapy include evidence-based therapy. And when I say evidence-based, it means that it has been proven to be effective in reducing the symptoms of PTSD. And those evidence-based treatment include things like cognitive processing therapy, acronym CPT, eye movement desensitization reprocessing, and that is EMDR, and it's widely becoming a very popular method of treating symptoms of PTSD. And that is a method that uses the eye stimulation, similar to when you're asleep, the rapid eye movement. And the trained therapist, is actually using your eye movement to desensitize the symptoms and some of the triggers and develop more positive cognitions about those symptoms and triggers. There's also narrative exposure therapy, and which is also effectively called WET, written exposure therapy. And the patient writes down the trauma, write down the effects of the triggers and the symptoms, and then they're reprocessed with the therapist in the next session. Another popular form of treatment is PE, prolonged exposure. And the patient is recording the trauma recording the triggers and the symptoms, and then those are also reprocessed with the trained therapists in the sessions. And one method that is fairly new to treating PTSD, and the Detroit VA is actually part of the pilot program, is virtual reality, where the goggles are being used, and the scenes are more positive scenes, and it allows the person to reprocess those negative triggers in normal settings and reprocess them with the more calming positive scenes from virtual reality. There are many other types of therapy that can be used for treating PTSD, particularly the ones I mentioned is what is being used at the Detroit VA with our veterans. But in the community, there's also cognitive behavior therapy. There is ACT, acceptance commitment therapy. And so there are many effective ways of treating PTSD, and they have been proven to reduce the symptoms and some of the triggers of PTSD. There is, I talked about prolonged exposure. That is not as popular. Sorry, I hit my video. Not as popular because it requires the patient to record themselves talking about the trauma, and a lot of patients feel that reliving that trauma is just triggering. And so there are many methods used to treat PTSD, and it is a shared decision between the patient and the therapist what the patient think works best for them in reducing these symptoms. PTSD symptoms can be reduced and minimized to allow a person to live a stable and healthy lifestyle, even though they are living with PTSD. And I think I talked about most of the methods, the common methods used. I am not going to get into the medication because I'm not a prescriber for medication. So I can't get into the medication for PTSD, but I think I've provided a lot of information on the types of therapy.
Shannon, thank you so much. Thank you very much. And our next three panelists are from Oakland Community College, and we'll start with our first one being Cheryl J. Decker. She is a psychology instructor here at OCC. And Cheryl, how are you?
I'm well, Jeff. How are you?
Very good. You know, Cheryl, every time I talk with students and your name comes up, I'm always told she's one of our favorites. They always they tell me that.
Well, it's definitely what I'm feeling as far as they are all my favorites. And
there you
so
go.
I'm thanking all of you along with the audience for allowing me the opportunity of just being with you today. I'm Cheryl Decker, and I'm a faculty member here at the Auburn Hills campus, and I get the privilege of waking up every day and teaching psychology to OCC students. For me, it's a gift. As faculty, we always teach to the course description and we adhere to the common course outcomes. That's given. But we are also given equal opportunity to be creative in the classroom. And we get to create a learning environment where students can learn in a fun way, they can thrive, and they can definitely succeed. So I try to create a place that stirs a lot of curiosity, that enhances critical thinking, and it becomes a springboard for a passion for learning, and I'm thinking more lifelong learning. So at OCC, we welcome all learners. Our arms are wide open. I'd like to start out by just kind of describing our population in a very general way, and then highlighting 3 different types of adaptations I'm using in the classroom once I got a better idea of the student that I'm teaching. So our population is fabulously diverse, with a big fabulous in this. Every student has their own story, and the stories are woven with happy experiences and grand memories, but they may also contain feelings of anxiety, some sadness, poor concentration, restlessness, interrupted sleep, and sometimes irritability. These are common signs and symptoms of generalized anxiety disorder. Today's students, the students that are in front of me, I am mindful that they are survivors of the global pandemic, and that pandemic spurred hardships and sacrifice and loss. Because I'm in Oakland County and I am in Auburn Hills, I'm mindful that some are still mourning with their Oxford neighbors and friends. Our students, they work hard. They carry full credit loads. They parent. They may be questioning their identity. They may have a history of being bullied, abused, or neglected. They may have been incarcerated. Students are beautifully courageous and strong, yet they are wonderfully fragile and sensitive too. And at OCC, students matter. So students, we see you, we hear you, we sense you. Students are my compass, always. They teach me to be a better teacher, and they demonstrate to me how to be a better person. They have taught me the importance of practicing compassionate listening, and when I communicate, to speak with a voice of care. So I'd like to share with you ways I've adapted, just 3 ways I've made some adaptations in my classroom to meet OCC students, the whole student, with all their wonder and all their challenges. And I kind of categorize them into 3, and that is be the calm, get active, and keep it safe. So be the calm. What does that mean? Well, whenever I think about my class for the day, I try to envision the life my students just led that morning or that afternoon just to show up. I try with my might to put myself in their shoes. First, they are busy commuters. Some arrive by car, some by multiple buses. Maybe some are coming off the 3rd shift of work. They've navigated through traffic jams, dropped off children at daycares. They're searching for a close parking lot, and when they hurriedly arrive, they're ready to learn. But quite honestly, woof, right? Students tell that they have a very noisy life and that they are yearning for quiet, and I keep that in mind. So when they walk into my classroom, I want them to walk in knowing that they are in the right place. I want them to feel that I've created a place of peacefulness, pleasant calm, and incredible warmth. When they walk in, I want them to feel welcomed. I want to create a place where it feels like a natural flow, like this is where they're supposed to be. So how to make that happen? It takes a lot of work, right? To the student, I want it to look seamless. I want it to look like this all just happened magically. But the truth of the matter is, I spend a lot of time prepping and organizing, and I show up early. I get the desks all orderly and cleaned. I start to play soft music, spa-like music, and then I get my PowerPoints ready. I get my props ready. I make sure that they have handouts, they have learning materials, they have notes. And I try to keep that flow consistent every time so that when they show up, it's familiar to them. And when I greet them, I smile. I try to create a positive place with great positive spirit and energy, and I greet them with a big hello. And if I know a little something about them or perhaps their weekend, I ask like, hey, how was that job interview? Or did you enjoy your family picnic? And when I'm in that classroom, I speak to them as equal. I speak to them with respect and kindness. And in turn, when I model that, that's what I receive back. I remind them that they belong, that there should never be a time where they should ever doubt that they don't belong in a place of learning in my classroom. And along the way, when I'm delivering a lesson, what I do is I pause and I ask for questions. I'm a big fan of formative assessments. And so I try to find out what they're grasping along the way and not wait for that exam at the end. But in that opportunity, I'm allowing them to be creative in their own way, to know that no question is silly, and to give them the space where they get to question some things that perhaps they never even thought about. And in the process, I'm honest. If they ask a question and I don't know the answer, I admit it. And then what I do is I suggest that we look up academic research together, and then we find the answer together. And then I'm also a big fan of AI. So then I say, let's go to ChatGPT and figure out what they said. And then what we do is compare, and then we giggle, right? So I'm also human. If I deliver something and it doesn't sound right to me, I'll often say, that sounded muddy. Did you make any sense of what I said? And then I kind of read the room. And if I see any of those blank faces, then I try with all my might, because all students are welcomed and all students are included, and I have all students of all kinds of abilities. I reshape that content in a way that all can learn. And what I do is I very casually, I spotlight my weaknesses. If something stirs me up by a question, I might just say that, ooh, boy, that was a hard one. Or, ooh, I need to work on that. And then what I ask them to do is to think about something that maybe in their life they would like to just kind of put extra attention to. So really, in the whole classroom environment, I try to create a positive feeling where not only do they feel that they belong and where they feel they're included, but they can see their own personal growth. Because what I do is I walk beside them. I'm not walking ahead of them or behind them. I'm walking beside them. And so when challenges come their way and they need to express that, and they need an extra shoulder to lean on and to help and to somehow create perhaps a lesson or a testing that could accommodate their needs, because maybe there's a family emergency that arose, they can count on me to do it. Because what I've learned is positivity is contagious. And once I demonstrate what positivity can look like, then that's what really sort of just shows up in my room. And so I end each class period always telling them to shine bright. And then I invite them back and tell them that I expect them to be there the next week because I want them to come back. Secondly, what we do is we get active. When students are asked what they are looking for from college, a common theme or two common themes that I usually get is just prepare me for my career. That's a given. But then they also say, like, I want to meet new friends. I'm 19. I want to meet people. Well, experiential learning is a great way to make sure that they get content and then they get the opportunity of meeting their classmates. My classes are filled with tons of experiential learning. So those activities maybe come and go, but I have things from puppets to movies to improv skits and art interpretation. We learn by doing, and in the long run, they get to know each other better. It's really easy to say that we learn by doing, but sometimes it's really hard to do. My students are reporting that they want to engage with their peers, but they feel that they lack the social skills to interact and connect with others. And it's really no fault of theirs. They just went through a global pandemic. The pandemic forced them, it forced us to isolate, for them to leave their classrooms, which were really familiar, and all of a sudden go home to remote learn. And their kitchen table was now converted into a classroom. As humans, we have a basic need to be with one another. It doesn't have to be a large group, but just a couple people that we can count on. They were required for years to do the opposite. So normal stages of human development were interrupted. They went on a big pause, and now they have to quickly catch up. And that's where we as faculty, we can be there as their bridge, as what we often called as their scaffold. And the goal is to start small. So if I were to ever ask students to get into a group on the first day, it wouldn't happen. I would see fear in their eyes, more fear than I'd ever seen before. So I do start small. I have small icebreakers, and I demonstrate beforehand. What we do is this is how we meet people. This is how we get a chance to meet and greet. What we do is we share personal experiences on whiteboards. And then what we do is we pair and share. We expand to larger groups. And then eventually what students do is they really, they create like their own learning circles. And they get to work with larger groups of students. And then they report back to their classes. Before long, by the end of the semester, they're planning our class end of semester party, and they're picking the food. And then last, with a wrap up, I try to keep it safe. I keep my classroom safe physically as well as emotionally. So I maintain safety by keeping classroom doors locked. If students have to leave and come and go for whatever reason, they know to shut the door. Some students want to sit kind of close. They want a quick exit, and I get that. Now, to have it emotionally safe, we in psychology, we tackle some tough subjects. We tackle tough subjects that others, would probably rather avoid. But exposure is done with some kind of soft finesse. It requires a sense of mindfulness and a gentleness. So whenever I introduce, especially the most toughest subjects, the introduction is key. And I lay out the lesson plan like, look, today what we're going to do is we're going to go over the topic of eating disorders. And yes, we are going to dive into bulimia nervosa and anorexia nervosa. Now, what I do is I have that lesson plan, but I basically ask them to take care of themselves. I tell them that they all have their own stories. And unfortunately, as much as I know them, I don't know every chapter of their story. And so I'm here to teach, not to harm. And I'm counting on them to take care of themselves, to please be mindful of their needs, and please pay attention to what they need and be their best friend. And I normalize the uncomfortable feelings that can be stirred up. And then what I do is I create the classroom so that we have a lot of breaks where people can come and go. There's a topic that is one of those that'll stir up, then they're given the chance to kind of step out. And then what we do is we ask them to just kind of wait. We'll take another stretch break and then rejoin when it's more of a convenient opportunity for them to accept the material. And what I tell them is you are not judged, you are strong, you are respected, and you are safe. And so the offering of lots of breaks gives other students the chance to applaud them and to realize that they are supported from not only me, but from their student body as well. So in conclusion, what I say is OCC is eager to embrace all that have a desire to learn. Faculty meet students where they are, and they encourage them to spread their wings and to soar. And so all you students out there who are part of my audience, I want you to know you get it, that you got this. And I want you to remember that as faculty, we have you. So I thank you for allowing me the time to be with you today, and I hope you enjoy the presentation. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you. Thanks, Cheryl. Next up is Melvin Chapman, who is also a psychology instructor here at OCC. And Mel and we share a special bond. We both have that title of veteran. So, Mel, with that in mind, Mel, we often hear about PTSD's association with veterans and people in the armed services and military, but how can PTSD affect those who have not been in the military?
Good afternoon, everyone, and great question, Jeff. It's some things just become habit, and when it comes to something like PTSD, if you look it up now, you won't see references to the military or references to veterans. But from its early days, it was thought to be something that primarily, if not only, affected veterans who were returning from war type situations, which everyone knows could be very traumatic. And often what would happen is the traumatic event didn't immediately trigger the issues. The issues might, the symptoms might come up a month later, several months later, sometime afterwards. And so it was associated with veterans and people who had served in the military. But when you look it up and when you see what it is, being exposed to threatening, terrifying events. And as we all know, that's not reserved for people who have military service. Many people have these types of experiences in their lives. And I guess if I'm going to give a theme to this, and it's the theme I give to pretty much everything, is one size does not fit all. So it is very possible for two or more people to be exposed to the exact same stimulus or the exact same emotionally disturbing, physically dangerous events and respond to them very differently. So when it comes to how can it affect the general population, it goes to why, even though this is being sponsored by the Student Veteran Association, we, made it a point. We need to invite and involve everybody, because everybody goes through things. Everybody experiences certain things differently. And you talk to someone, it usually doesn't take long to determine that, wow, you've experienced something. You've been through something. And with PTSD, like many other things, sometimes you aren't the first to know. You might be the first to know that something upset me greatly and something is off. But with many other psychological disorders and illnesses, the stigma stops us from doing anything. The stigma tells us that if I'm feeling off, even if something happened that would make that almost a natural reaction, does that mean there's something wrong with me? I don't want there to be anything wrong with me. So I think the best thing for me to do is ignore it, and it'll probably go away. And if any of us have had problems that we took that approach to, we'll ignore it and hope it goes away. Most of us have found that's not typically how things work. So we've had speakers who talked about symptoms, having certain triggers, recurring thoughts, flashbacks to the traumatic event. which causes us to be so very guarded with our thoughts to try to make sure that they don't go back there, we're not functioning at our highest. We may be missing things that are going on currently because we're busy trying to keep certain thoughts out of our minds. Nightmares, recurring dreams. As if anybody's had nightmares, they know that when you wake up from a nightmare, one of the things you don't want to do is go right back to sleep because you're afraid you may go back to that nightmare. And we also know pretty much what happens when we don't sleep. If we don't sleep well, we don't remember well, our cognitive functioning isn't at its highest, we're often fatigued, and so we're not functioning at our highest level. So the first thing to do is to pay attention to ourselves and know if something has disturbed me greatly, it doesn't mean that it's anything wrong. It means that I'm a human and I react certain ways to certain things. And I need to acknowledge and share. We recommend that everyone have an annual physical. And when something is feeling out of sorts, if something is causing pain, to see a doctor. We're used to doing that physically. We're not so used to doing that psychologically and emotionally, mentally. And in fact, sometimes we're not just not used to doing it, we are very resistant to doing it. But you may notice when you go to the doctor now, they may ask you questions about how you're feeling that doesn't have to do with, does your arm or leg hurt? It don't have to do with physical symptoms. It has to do with how you're feeling emotionally, how you're feeling psychologically. And we're getting there. If you are a student and you are overly stressed, particularly, how easy is it to study? How easy is it to pay attention to what's going on in class? How easy is it to stay focused? So we want everyone to know that PTSD it doesn't necessarily affect everyone who goes through a traumatic event, but it certainly can. And when it does develop, it doesn't mean that there's anything wrong. It just means that there's something that needs to be attended to. And when seeking medical advice, try to pay attention to what's going on with you so that when they ask you questions, you can answer those questions fully. And you can answer those questions honestly without worrying about being judged, without worrying about being seen as different or flawed. But they ask you questions because you're where they get most of their information from. And if the information they're getting is not accurate when they attempt to help you, well, they may be acting on flawed information or they may be acting on part information. The school, OCC, has resources, instructors, if you feel willing to open up that something's going on, can refer you to the counseling department. The counselors can. So I don't want to tarry any longer other than to say that it is a part of living. It's a part of being human. You want to be your best self, and whatever it takes to do that, feel free to reach out for it. Jeff, I'm going to go back to you and let you kind of take us out because I think I'm going a little long, so I'm going to cut off. But please, you can look us up. You have questions, look us up, reach out, and we'll be here for you. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, Mel. Thank you so much. We have one final panelist to speak with, and that is Christine Evans. She is a counselor for Oakland Community College. And Chris, I'll give you the question straight out here. How can OCC counselors support?
May just check your temperature, my dear.
How can OCC counselors support students who might be experiencing PTSD or other mental health concerns for that matter?
Thank you. And thank you, Jeff, for having this event each year for our participants. This is, we're several years into having this event during PTSD Awareness Month. And we do value being able to present information to you. So first, I wanted to start out by saying PTSD and other mental health concerns are experienced by all of us at some time or another. And each of us, depending upon our background or our experiences, may have different reactions, and all of them are okay. Sometimes you might feel like that's overwhelming and you might not know where to turn. So I want to point out that OCC, we have counselors that are available to work with you. Most of you know that counselors can help you with planning your classes and creating a plan with your career and whatnot. But we also do offer personal counseling for our students. So all of us in the counseling area, we have licenses, and we have now a new personal counseling model where we're allowed to work with students for 4 to 5 sessions on personal counseling issues. It could be related to PTSD, it could be related to other mental health concerns, and we can help you perhaps adjust to college, or if you are having issues that you need resources, that's something that we can do. When you come into our office or when you have a phone call with us, assume that the information that you tell us is confidential. We hold that confidential. There are a couple of exceptions to confidentiality, and that would be if there's a minor or someone who is in an endangered area, it has safety concerns, if we have safety concerns for you. But we will tell you if those are concerns that are starting to breach any sort of confidentiality issues. But counselors can work with you. Again, if you're currently enrolled, we can have 4 to 5 sessions for you for our limited counseling. And even if you don't want to work with us, we can make referrals to outside agencies. And like both of our instructors talked about today, if you're experiencing challenges in the classroom because of a mental health concern and you don't know how to address it with that faculty member, we can certainly talk through your options and help you come up with a plan to address that with your instructor, or maybe even with our access office, because there are times when students with disabilities, which can include mental health issues, they may qualify for some additional services or some accommodations because of that. So we are definitely here to support you. We recognize that everyone comes from different places and have different comfort levels, but we want to connect you with resources. We want to support you, and we want to help you feel good about your time at OCC. I thank each of you for coming today for this event. It says something that you made some time in your day to hear us. Again, we do have a chat where we're answering questions if you have them. Certainly you can reach out to counseling. You can reach us through our webpage, and we'll have some resources also at the very end that we'll have on the screen for you additionally. Again, thank you very much for your time. I'm going to turn it back over to Jeff. Thanks.
Chris, thank you so much. Thank you. I'd like to invite all our panelists back now. And to our guests, this is your time now. We've had some questions come in, and our panelists have answered those particular questions. So if we can just ask our panelists to come back, and I don't want to embarrass Cheryl, but it looks like she got that answered. I knew she was going to get a compliment. I just knew it. So she got that question answered, but we want to open it up to our guests now. Please, in the Q&A box, please type in any questions you might have. As you can see, we have an all-star panel that is ready to help. I believe we have a silent audience today.
Oh, I did see a question. What is one myth we would like to, or we would I would like to debunk about PTSD? And again, well, one problem is comparisons. A person may feel silly or different about what's going on with them. But what happened to me isn't nearly as bad as what happened to them. Or what happened to me is worse than what happened to you, so you should be okay. It's not a competition. And there is not one, while there's a set of criteria that needs to be met, one person's PTSD is not another person's PTSD. And in fact, one person's treatment method that will bring them the greatest success is not the same as what might bring the greatest success to another person. So again, with many things, don't take a one-size-fits-all approach. Don't compare what's going on with you to what's going on with someone else. Just don't feel like there is anything outside of the ordinary with you. Nobody lives their entire life without having a cold, the flu, something. Our brain is infinitely more complicated than any other part of our body. So the idea that, yeah, we understand if something goes on physically with us, that happens, but not with the brain. Well, the brain has billions and billions and billions of moving parts. The odds that everything should always work exactly as we would want it to or should is a myth. And we should be able to get past that. Thanks, Jeff.
I see a question about treatment, and it asks, can meditation or hypnosis be a type of therapy to reduce PTSD? While there are constantly treatment methods being proven to be effective for reducing PTSD, there is one that's not practiced at this VA in Detroit, but it is brief electric psychotherapy. And that way you're actually doing meditation and relaxation techniques to reduce the PTSD symptoms. One thing that a lot of the therapy have in common is that you want to take those negative cognitions and negative triggers and symptoms and revert them to more positive. So then when that trigger presents itself, it's not as triggering as before treatment.
There's one question that came in, and I just want to address it. Unfortunately, there's no certificate related to today's presentation. So the individual asking for that, I apologize, but we simply do not have a certificate related to today's event.
Jeff, I will jump in. They may be asking because of extra credit that may have been offered by certain instructors. I have been taking screenshots of the participant list and the attendees list. So if someone wants to get with their instructor and let them know, hey, I was here, if they email me, I will confirm, send them a copy of that list.
Hey, I'm seeing a few questions come in here.
Yeah.
I know that our panelists have been replying by typing directly to the individual asking that question. And feel free as the panel to please address what grabs your attention there.
The question, is there a method more effective for complex PTSD? I would say probably the most common method is EMDR right now for more complex PTSD. So eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. CPT is used for more of single event trauma than it is for complex trauma. And no, we're not moving away from the word disorder. That's the word that's in the DSM. So that's the technical title for PTSD. The DSM is your code book for billing. So they have not moved away from saying PTSD or post-traumatic stress disorder.
I'm seeing some thank yous in the chat. Stress management techniques just in general, there's such a range of things that students or anyone can do for stress management. Typically physical types of techniques, walking, movement, stretching, making sure that you drink enough water. We don't tend to do that in a day, drink enough water, but water, making sure you get nutrients, protein, laughter. That's a really great technique for stress management, and something that we don't do often enough. Music makes a big difference to many people, whether it's meditative sorts of music or music where they can feel like they just want to dance and get movement in along with music. There's so much that you can do. I have a whole list, so if you reach out to me, I can send you a list of stress management techniques, just general ones that I'd be happy to share.
I'm afraid our time is running short today, and we definitely want to get our PTSD resources up there so that people can certainly look at where the available help is. And time is running away on us today. We will try to get back with everyone that did not get their question answered. I do want to thank our wonderful panel for their input today. I want to thank our sign language interpreters for their assistance. And definitely want to mention our OCC sponsors once again, the Office of DEIJ and the Student Veterans of America. And a big, big thank you to you for sharing this hour with us. We hope that you are going away with a much better understanding of PTSD and knowing that help and treatment is available.